A warm welcome to everybody. Today is a special day. Today is celebrated as the World Pepper Day, and we are also having our first series of web series from IPC. And the theme for today is Global Supply and Demand of Pepper, the Recalibrating Expectations. The agenda for today is as follows. I would like to welcome in the beginning our very own director, Ms. Virna, to give the opening address. This would be followed by the country crop presentations, starting with India, Indonesia, Malaysia, moving on to Sri Lanka, Vietnam, Brazil, and Cambodia. After the country crop presentations, we would have a presentation on the global market scenario. This will be followed by a presentation on sustainability by our guest speaker, Mr. Jans, who also heads the IDH program. This will be followed by a presentation by Ms. Laura, who is the Executive Director of American Spice Trade Association, and she will tell us more about the US regulations. Then we have the most awaited global crop report, which will be presented by a director and followed by a vote of thanks. So to start the program, I would like to invite our director, Ms. Fidna, to please come in and give us the opening address. Over to you, madam.
Thank you, Mr. Jasvinder, our moderator for the IPC Webinar Series 1 2023. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ms. Representative of Pepper Producing Countries, Mr. Ramalingam, Deputy Director, Spices Board, Government of India, Mr. Reza Pahlavi, Director of International Negotiations and International Organization, Ministry of Trade, Indonesia, Mr. Langi Chaling, Senior Director, Malaysian Pepper Board. We have Dr. Ananda Subasingaya, Alternate Director General, Department of Export Agriculture, Sri Lanka. We also have Ms. Tan Hao from Vietnam, Mr. Parsram Dirani, Managing Director, Royal Golden General Trading, Mr. Van Vanal, Executive Director, Cambodia Pepper and Spices Federation, or CPSF, Ms. Laura Shumo, Executive Director, American Spice Trade Association, or ASTA, Mr. Jan, Senior Program Manager, IDH, the Sustainable Trade Initiative. My dearest international pepper community family, webinar participants, and ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good evening from Jakarta, the natural beauty of the metropolitan city. On behalf of the International Pepper Community Secretariat, it is with great honor that I welcome you to the first series of IPC webinar for 2023 with the theme Global Supply and Demand of Pepper, Recalibrating Expectation. I would like to sincerely express my utmost gratitude and appreciation to all of you for having spent time from your busy schedule to participate in this IPC webinar. Before I proceed, please allow me to introduce myself briefly. My name is Virna Azura Eka Putri Haji Marzuki from Malaysia, and I'm the Executive Director of the International Pepper Community. Today, though we are meeting in a virtual posture or a digital platform, let us use this opportunity to be brief with the update on regulation of consuming countries, the balance of supply and demand of pepper, the sustainable aspect of the pepper industry, as well as country report of pepper producing countries. Ladies and gentlemen, 2023 is set to be another challenging, encouraging and exciting year for the pepper industry in the aftermath of the global pandemic. Though the globally condition has significantly improved, but the pepper industry is still affected by some challenges such as the instability of the pepper prices, more stringent regulations for the pepper trade, unfavorable climate change, as well as other issues from the production side. In this regard, the first series of IPC webinar for 2023 therefore was designed with the theme Global Supply and Demand of Pepper, Recalibrating Expectation. Today we have invited distinguished speakers to briefly talk about various challenges and update on the pepper industry. To kick off the session, we'll be listening to the report of country crop of pepper producing countries, continued by Mr. Jasvinder later, our consultant or economist of the International Pepper Community, who will present the latest global pepper market scenario. Right after that, we have Mr. Jan Giluis, Senior Program Manager of the IDH, the Sustainable Trade Initiative, who will present on sustainability of the pepper industry, and followed by Ms. Laura, the Executive Director of the American Spice Trade Association, ASTA, will then take us through the update of USA regulations for pepper trade. Following that, finally, I will present the adoption of Global Crop Report for 2022-2023. At the end of the presentation, there will be a question and answer session and a panel discussion. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, the International Pepper Committee is committed to ensure that the global pepper industry will remain sustainable and competitive. This is in particular to its role in promoting and coordinating the development of the pepper industry, which are much needed as we shift gears in the aftermath of the global pandemic and other global issues. Following China's implementation of zero COVID policy in 2022, which prevented product coming into the country, we saw some excess of the global pepper supply which have yet to be absorbed. As China relaxes their COVID policy coming in 2023, we are seeing a significant increase of import by China just in the first 3 months. We are expecting the China buying could affect the previously reported excess, as the supply of pepper steadily increased year by year, while incomparably the demand side seems sluggish. We at the IPC believe that there are still a lot of work that need to be done. Venturing new market for pepper, encouraging the domestic consumption, and stimulating more value addition product are among the few that all IPC member countries and stakeholders of the pepper industry ought to work on it together, hand in hand. Ladies and gentlemen, I always believe that two heads are better than one, and as such, it is with our high hope that all pepper industry stakeholders will work together hand in hand and strengthen our networking and cooperation for the betterment of the pepper industry. Once again, on behalf of the IPC Secretariat, I would like to sincerely express my utmost gratitude and appreciation to all of you, especially to our distinguished speakers, and also to our webinar participants for having spent time from your busy schedule to participate and contribute to the first series of IPC webinar for this year. On that note, I wish you all of you a very productive and informative webinar. Thank you. Salam hormat wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Over to you, Jasvinder. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for the opening address. Without spending further time, I would request the Indian team to take over, and over to you, Mr. Ramalingam.
Thank you, sir. At the outset, I would like to thank IPC for giving an opportunity to present the crop report on pepper about India. Before that, I would like to thank IPC Executive Director, Madam Firna, for celebrating the International Pepper Day. That's a very good for the promotion of pepper. Definitely, it will go in a long way to promote pepper in the producing as well as in the consuming countries. Coming to the myself, I'll introduce myself. I'm Mr. Ramalingam, Deputy Director, Spice Board India, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Government of India. And along with me, Ms. Reggie, Assistant Director, Marketing, is with me. So I'll straight away go to the presentation. Please, next slide. Yeah, India's production during 22, it was finally 70,000, and 2023 we have a projection of 64,000. There was a shortfall because of the adverse climatic conditions. Still, some highland areas we have harvesting is in progress. Probably when the annual sessions are conducted, we may be able to give you a clear picture. Coming to exports, 2022, we have done 18,895 tons. And with the projection, we have 22,500 tons. Yes, still we are to get the final figures. So probably that may also change since we have made the projection. And imports during 2022, 41,455, maybe the highest among the last 3 or 4 years. Maybe we are doing the value addition, mostly comes for value addition and re-exports. The projection for 2023 is around 35,500. Please, next slide. Coming to that initiatives, we are having an ongoing program of Mission for Integrated Development of Horticulture (MIDH), and implemented by the Ministry of Agriculture through the State Agriculture and Horticulture Departments, which covers pepper development programs also exclusively. So we have the production and distribution of high-yielding, disease-free quality planting materials, replanting of old and senile gardens, area expansion in non-traditional areas, promoting INM, IPM, IDM, and sustainability in pepper, mechanization post-harvest management, promoting certified organic pepper production, then quality improvement training programs for the farmers groups, members of NGOs, traders, exporters, etc. So these are the major initiatives on the production side. Please, next slide, please. Initiatives regarding the marketing. We are promoting the farmer producer organizations because they could do the aggregation and do the processing and value addition in a better way, and they could do marketing also in a collectively, which will definitely help the better price realization. Second one is we are organizing the buyer-seller meets. This is nothing but we conduct in the growing amidst the growing areas, to have direct market linkage between the farmers and farmers groups and with processors, exporters, institutional buyers, so that they establish a direct market linkage, so that it will help to avoid the middlemen in the supply chain, and the farmers able to get better price for their produce. So these are the 2 initiatives we are doing for marketing of pepper. Coming to exports, next slide. Next slide, please. Export promotion, we support the industry, pepper industry, to enhance the processing facilities to achieve high-end value addition. You may be knowing that India is the leader in the value addition, particularly in high-end value addition, oils and oleoresins. So we support the industries to upgrade their processing facilities. Then we support the industry for establishing a quality evaluation labs on their own in their laboratories to assure the quality and food safety of spices, including pepper. Then we promote the producer groups and exporters in obtaining authorized user certificate for marketing and export of GI tagged Malabar pepper. The Malabar pepper in India is well known in the internationally, and we have obtained the GI tag. So we would like to promote that GI tag in marketing and export of the product. Coming to common processing facility, we established a processing, packing, and storage facilities in a core pepper growing area called Idukki district at a place called Spice Park at Puttadi in Kerala. Then we established a quality evaluation laboratories in leading port cities, maybe the dry ports and wet ports in the country like Kochi, Mumbai, Chennai, Tuticorin, Guntur, Delhi, Kandla, and Calcutta, to monitor the quality of export consignments of spices, including pepper. And we also organize international buyer-seller meets after COVID. We got a new opportunity to interact with buyers. So we have successfully conducted more than 10 international buyer-seller meets for the last 2 years. Recent one we conducted with China, with the support of our Indian embassy there. So the international buyer-seller meets helps to link with the suppliers, that means Indian exporters as well as the importers from overseas countries, so that they could able to meet virtually, and they can and with a few presentations on the technical side, which will help both the sides. So this we have taken very seriously, and we are going ahead with organizing more programs in the coming year also, in the current year also. Next, please. So with this, I thank you all, and I welcome all of you to the 14th World Space Congress to be held in Mumbai 15 to 17 September 2023. And the registration details we have given. You can visit the wellspacecongress.com website, and for email also we given. So please contact us. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir, for a very brief presentation to the point. And we observed that India has a slightly smaller crop due to the weather issues. Moving on next, we will request the panelists from Indonesia to please present the Indonesian pepper situation. Yeah, it will be presented by Miss Yenny. Please. I think you have to unmute your screen.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mr. Jasvinder. I use a microphone for, and good evening, Honorable Chairman of the IPC for 2023, Mrs. Verna Zuraika Putri, Executive Director of the IPC, Mr. Reza Pahlevi, Director from the Ministry of Trade of the Republic of Indonesia, distinguished representative from the IPC member countries, invited speakers and participants, ladies and gentlemen. We are here today in honor of International Paper Day 2023, and it is truly an honor to attend this important event by the paper sector stakeholders, including government officials, private sector representatives, and also association, producers, traders, and also the consumers. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Yeni Hernawati, also from the Ministry of Trade of the Republic of Indonesia. And as requested by the IPC Secretariat, allow me to present our country's crop report on paper. The first slide. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know that Indonesia is one of the world's largest paper producers and exporters. According to the reports, the amount of paper exported from Indonesia in the years 2020, 2021, and 2022 was 160.39 USD, or 58,378 metric ton, and 166.75 million USD, or 37,738 metric ton, and 148.11 million USD, or 29,580 metric ton respectively. And for your information, the whole white and black pepper are dominated in the export compositions of Indonesian paper product in 2022. And moving on, paper import by Indonesia in 2022, 2020, 2021, and 2022 were reported to reach an amount of 1.99 million USD, or 604 metric ton. And then 1.53 million USD, or 319 metric ton, and 3.18 million USD, or 562 metric ton respectively. And paper from Indonesia is exported to numerous countries around the world. And the top 5 export destinations of Indonesian paper based on the volume in 2022 were Vietnam, US, and then China, India, and Japan. And in terms of imports, the top 5 origin wherein Indonesia imports the most paper in 2022 based on the volume were Vietnam, Indonesia, especially Batam, China, and then South Korea and the United States. Next slide, please. Ladies and gentlemen, let's now proceed to this slide. According to the published data from the Ministry of Agriculture, the production of Indonesian paper in 2023 is projected at 83,847 tons. Meanwhile, the productivity for 2023 is projected at 739 kilograms per hectare. And total plantation areas are projected at 187,727 hectares, with the total farmers of 288,765 manpower. Next slide, please. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, as I just mentioned, there are a number of things that could change the crop data for 2023. The price of paper is an important factor in the level of productivity and the production of Indonesian paper. And another aspect that needs to be taken into consideration is climate. And as the focal point of Indonesia for the IPC, the Ministry of Trade works with the relevant paper stakeholders in Indonesia, including the Ministry of Agriculture and the Statistic Indonesian Agency to synchronize the data. And ladies and gentlemen, we hope that our presentation will help clarify the situation of the Indonesian paper crop. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Yeni. Now over to Malaysia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for IPC that given us the opportunity to present our country report at this webinar. Just to introduce myself, I'm Langi Chaling, Senior Director from the Malaysian Paper Boards. Next slide, please. As an introduction, Sarawak is blessed with suitable soil type and climate conditions for cultivating high quality paper. It supports the 39,000 paper farmers in Malaysia. 98% of Malaysian paper is produced in Sarawak region, and about 70% of Malaysia paper is exported as a black and as a white paper. Next slide, please. If you look at this map, the area planted in Malaysia in the year 2020, cultivation area is about 8,020 hectares, and then only 1% planted in Peninsular Malaysia, and 0.7% in Sabah, and 98.3% in the Sarawak region. Next slide. If you look at the hectarage and production, year 2021, we have about 7,499 hectares. Production is about 21,600 and increased to 8,020 hectares. And also the production also increased. And hopefully by this year, 2023, our hectarage already increased to 8,170 hectares. And of course, the production is 23,000 hectares. And hopefully by next year, it will increase by 23,900 production in the year 2024. Next slide. If you look at the export and import figure for Malaysia, export in the year 2021, we have about 7,390 metric ton, equivalent to 37,000 USD. And is reduced in the 2022 due to the COVID-19. And we estimate in this year, 2023, the export will be increased by 7,500 with the income with the USD about 37,769. But if you look at the import, we hope to reduce the import by 2023. 2021, the import is about 2,800, and it reduced in 2022, and further reduced by this year. 2023 is about 2,000 metric ton, and hopefully we reduce this import, especially from countries like Indonesia and of course Vietnam, because of the price. Next, please. If you look at the future strategic direction, way forward for Malaysia by 2030. The first was as to inclusiveness, partnership between paper smallholders and industry players. The big company, we encourage them to participate in this industry, especially in the Peninsula Malaysia. Secondly, market development. We try to expand into specialized product and new market segment. That's why where is our R&D? We come in, of course, our new market is like Europe market, and of course the traditional market like Japan and Korea. Third, value creation, accelerate the shift to downstream activities. Paperboard try our very best to produce premium paper such as creamy white paper and pesticide-free. And of course, we want to produce organic paper in the near future. The fourth one is productivity. We want to introduce this new adoption, especially the good agriculture practice of smallholders farmers, especially those stay in the rural areas. And the last one, sustainability, to ensure sustainability of paper industry through higher yield and quality. What we have now, of course, we have a better quality, but hopefully we can have a better one, which can a better yield and of course resistant to disease. So with that, short briefing from Malaysian Paper Board. Thank you to the IPC and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Let us move to Sri Lanka now.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? Mr. Aswitha, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. First of all, thank you very much for inviting this specific seminar in 2023 from IPC. And I would like to thank EDIPC, Ms. Perna, and all other distinguished panelists and all the listeners of this webinar. So moving into my presentation, the global supply and demand of paper, Papanigram, Recalibrating Expectation. I am representing Sri Lanka through the Department of Export Agriculture. I am working there as the Additional Director General Research. So next slide, please. Next slide, please. Please,
Gali, are you there?
slide.
Gali and Budiman, could you please take us to the next slide?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Right. Moving into the exports and imports, you can see our whole paper products, all black paper, whole white paper, black paper ground, black paper, white paper ground, green paper, and all other products. During 2020, the total production of metric ton around 9,443. It has been double in 2021, and but in 2022, it has been reduced to 11,775. Actually, the black paper, the whole black paper is same. Our production of whole black paper around 5,358. In 2021, it has been double, and again 2023, it has been reduced due to the climatic effects of the production. Especially in the rainy season and the drought spells, the flowering initiation has been dropped. That is why the reason for reduction of these exports. So moving into the importation, actually, as you already know, our imports of paper has been banned, but with some agreements, there are some companies to allow import paper to Sri Lanka. So, however, the total imports in 2020 it is around 5.76, and 2021 it has been increased 59.2, and 2023 same, right? Same, mostly same. And this is the importation of paper in Sri Lanka. It has been, after the banning of importation, it has been reduced drastically. That is why we are importing very little amount of paper during last few years. Please, next slide. Yeah, to the paper production, you can see here 2021, our total production was 24,000 metric ton, 24,382 metric ton. White paper around 665. The total was 25,047. And 2022 is still estimated 23,754. The white paper bit decreased. The total was around 24,029. 2023, we just project that we can project that it will be a bit high, bit increased as compared to the 21, 20, and 2023 too. It will be around 25,225, and white paper around 325, and total will be around 25,550. But still, with these days, we are experienced with a bit drier and warmer climate in Sri Lanka. Now, after flowering, it was around 4 months, 5 months has gone. So if we if it continue this type of weather, I think this projection will be decreased than 25,000. And paper exports will be around 2021. It was around 17.302, and white paper 657, and total was around 17,959. And 2022, it has been decreased, as I mentioned earlier, due to the climatic effect of the cultivation. And even total was decreased from 17,000 to 11,000. We are projecting in 2023, it will be around 12,500 black paper. White paper will be 300, and total will be around 12,800. This one also will be decreased with the prevailing weather exists for next 2-3 months. I think the production will be a bit decreased. So next slide. Thank you. These are the actually what are the we are going to the way forward, our expectation in paper cultivation, paper industry in Sri Lanka. The first one is maintain the stability of production based by conducting the rewarding system of new cultivation, because actually for with the price fluctuation, some of the farmers are neglecting, and they are going for some other crops. So we need to stable the production for the paper cultivation. So I'm giving some rewarding like free planting material and free technology for the technology transfer. Sorry. And also some irrigation facilities. This type of some rewarding facilities are we are planning to give to stable the production in Sri Lanka. The next one is increase the productivity of existing cultivation. Our productivity is around 800 per year per hectare, but our research data will be around 2,500. So we can increase more than that. So we need to increase the productivity, because the increased extent is a bit difficult because the land is limited. The next one is quality improvement by GMP and mechanization. We know that for the world market, they need some quality paper products. So we need to increase the quality improvement by GMP and some mechanization. And also the value addition and product diversification. For different markets, they need different type of products. So need to produce some value-added products instead of black paper and white paper. So we need some product diversification for niche markets. And also we are giving now GAP, Good Agricultural Practice, because I am the actually chief certification officer for GAP in Sri Lanka for the paper. So with this GAP, we observe that we can increase the production also with some practices in the field. So again, we are going to branding, GI and GMP. We already taken GI for paper cinnamon, so we need to get the GI for some specific areas and a specific paper in Sri Lanka. The other one is development traceability system with farmer registration. We are continuing the farmer registration to trace the different farmers for different products. And also the conservation of the genetic diversity. In Sri Lanka, we have different type of accessions and some different type of paper species and varieties. So we need to conserve this genetic diversity in Sri Lanka to improve the different new improved varieties. So the next one is development improved varieties. We already 3-4 years back we introduced 3 hybrids, Dingirala, Kukumburerala, and Butaverala. Out of this, Dingirala is a bit higher popular among farmers. So we need to develop some more other improved varieties with higher production and higher quality. The last one is value chain development. We know that from planting material to consumer, there are different gaps in the value chain. So we have to address some gaps and we have to fulfill that. So we need to produce higher productivity, increase the productivity and also the quality and also the value-added products. So especially for value chain development, we have to address. So then we can produce very good quality paper. Thank you very much. That's all for the presentation for Sri Lanka. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ananda. Over to Ms. Hao for Vietnam.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. Dear the director of IPC, the distinguished speaker and participant, my name is Hao. I'm from the Vietnam Paper Association. And first of all, I would like to, I hope everyone is doing well. And now I will share some information about the Vietnam paper crop. Next slide, please. As you can see about the slide we have here, in Vietnam, the majority of the plantation we are having in 6 provinces, which the highest one from Đắk Nông stand for 43%, and with these 6 provinces stand for 94% of the entire countries. And about the plantation, in 2022, we are having 120,000 hectares, and while in 2023, we don't have the number yet, which we will share with you later. And about the production, in 2022, the whole production of the Vietnam paper is reaching 183,000 tons, and we are expected to in 2023 up to 200,000 tons. Can we go to the next slide? And regarding to the paper export, as we can see here, about the exporting volume, we seen the decrease in 2016, and then we're having the highest record of the exporting quantity in 2019 with 287,000 tons, and then it keep decreasing until this moment, 2023, due to the difficulties in the inflation about the crop. And at the same time, about the price, we are seeing also a decreasing, and then there's a slight increase again in 2020 and 21. And to this moment, to 23, we are seeing a decrease due to the inflation and the drop in the demand of the market. And for the whole exporting, in 2022, 11% is of white pepper and 89% is of black pepper. And our main markets we are exporting to in 2020, the biggest importer of the Vietnamese pepper is USA with 54,686 tons, followed by China with 21,932 tons, and then United Arab with 16,103 tons, India 12,297 tons, and then German with 9,655 tons. And during this difficult situation with a drop in the demand, now the Vietnam paper, we are having two major projects. The first one is we focus to apply our sustainable in large scale, and in which we pay attention the first in the plantation of the pepper. We're working directly with the farmers to about the plantation, about the pesticide residue, and then about the traceability. And with this project, we are join hand together with all the factors in the pepper industry, from the government to the VPA or the manufacturer, exporter, and the most importantly, the farmers. And the second project we are working on is about the marketing. So we in after the COVID in 2022 and this year, we are attending to many exhibitions to develop our marketing to reach out to many more customers in the markets. Like we are having a group to attend Seoul in Paris, or to this year we attend Gofu in Dubai, and then we Anuga in Germany. And also we will I think that, and we were having some promotion activities as well to promote the Vietnam pepper products. That's all about the Vietnamese pepper. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Ms. Howe. That was an interesting presentation. Now for Brazil, we would request Mr. Parsuram to please take us through the presentation. Over to you, sir.
Hi, Jaswant, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, very clear. Please go ahead.
All right. Thank you, IPC, for giving me an opportunity to speak on Brazilian pepper. Good evening to everybody, all the panelists and all the attendees. My name is Parsuram Dhirani. I'm from Royal Golden General Trading, Dubai. Today, I'll give you some brief information about the Brazilian black pepper 2023. I've been advised to keep it short, small, and sweet, so I'll be really quick. Before I tell about these figures, I like to give you information. In Brazil, the crop, this pepper is produced in three main areas: North, Para, Espírito Santo, South, and then Northeast, Bahia. Major crop are all in three areas. North harvest period is August, September. South is two crops, Jan and June. So there's two crops in Espírito Santos. And then Bahia is in, there are also two, March, April, and October, November. So about 5 years back, North used to produce more than the South. The last 5 years, South has taken over. So now South is producing more than the North. And within the North, also there's some changes. Jan crop used to be the major crop, and then June crop used to be catch crop. But now this other way around. So January crop is small crop relatively, and June crop is a bigger crop. So let's talk about the Brazilian export data. As you can look at from 2019 to 2023, these are export figures. Each year, Brazil is exporting almost 90,000 tons. So we can say is one of the biggest producing exporters of black pepper after Vietnam. In 2019, they roughly exported around 85,000 tons. Out of that, 40,000 tons from Espírito Santos, and from Para, 35,000, and Bahia, 3,000. And again, in 2020, around 90,000, 48 from Espírito Santos, 30,000 from Para, and 6,000 from Bahia. 2021, again 92,000 tons, 52 from Espírito Santos, 28,000 from Para, and 7,000 from Bahia. 2022, again they produced around 90,000 tons, 51 from Espírito Santos, 24,000 from Para, and 8,400 something from Bahia. And this year they have already exported around 20,000 tons. So if you look at the last 4 years figure, so probably we still have 70,000 tons to be exported April onward until December from Brazil. And you might have noticed the Bhaya's production is increasing every year from 3,000 to 5 to 7 to 8,000. So Bhaya has become one of the third largest producing area in Brazil. Next slide. 2023 crop is roughly similar to last year. There's some rain, heavy rain, probably some damage is there, but not much. So we expect around 60,000 tons from Espírito Santo. And again, Jaswinder?
Yes, sir. We'll just, yeah, continue, sir.
Okay, all right. No, again. Yes, so we're expecting around 60,000 tons from Espírito Santo and Para North around 30,000, Bahia around 10,000, and other region around 5,000. So roughly all together, we are expecting 105 to 110,000 tons again in Brazil. And then method used in drying, Espírito Santo normally 80% is machine dries, and you probably can get around 10 to 20% sun dried. Whereas in Para North, mostly is sun-dried, and Bahia is also sun-dried. Approximately plantation area this year around 32 to 35,000 hectare, and each hectare is 2.5 tons to 3 tons. A dyeing ratio for vines around 10 to 15% every year. A new plantation, of course, is going down because of the lower prices, higher fertilization cost, and inflations. So probably we will see going forwards in 2024-25, you will see reduced production from Brazil. Again, these farmers, as general rule, if they don't get better price, so they don't care about the vines properly, they don't put fertilization, and fertilization cost is also high. Prices are low, and then a labor issue also is there as compared. I mean, it's all over, but also Brazil also same issues there. Their local consumption is around 10,000 tons. Brazil is going to be major supplier for pepper June onwards. As I mentioned you earlier that January crop used to be the biggest crop at Espírito Santo. Now it's going to be a June crop. It's very important to note that June we're going to have a bigger crop in Espírito Santo. And followed by August, September, we're going to have from Para also the crop. So June onward, we will have a sufficient supply for pepper. However, prices, I believe, will not come down. Price will remain stable in the range of 2,800 to 3,100. The reason being, June onward, you will notice the Middle East will be very active for Brazilian pepper, as well as the Vietnam will be also the major importers for black pepper. Why Vietnam will be importers? Because of higher interest rates, so they cannot buy black pepper and store and pay so much cost. So probably they're all forward sale. They'll try to hedge from Brazil and buy from Brazil. That's going to be a really active active importers for Brazilian pepper, both in Middle East as well as in Vietnam. What advice I can give to Brazilian export? They need to focus more on sun-dried, which is mostly acceptable method of drying to many countries. So they should focus less on machine dries and more on sun-dried. And also, normally there's not big issue on pesticide from Brazilian. However, it has been detected on several occasions. So farmers needs to be educated to apply the best agriculture practices, so this pesticide issue can be reduced and then they can export more quantity. And also there's a lot of regulation in Europe and elsewhere for safe pepper to Salmonella, E. coli, and all this thing. To reduce this one, I think they need to put plants, sterilized plants, and so they can export a good quality pepper. I would strongly recommend if government can intervene, and then they can put centralized 2 units, one in north, one in south, where all exporter can utilize their facility by paying the fixed fees, and then they can increase their export. And apart from increasing export, they can ship really safe black pepper to the rest of the world. That's really a way forward for them, and they should really focus on this one. As far as I know, I think one of the company has already started steam sterilized products. So that's about it for black pepper from Brazil. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. That was indeed a good presentation and a good flavor on the market also. Now we would request Mr. Wan from Cambodia to give us some idea on what is happening in Cambodia.
Hello everyone, my name is Wanawan. I am the Executive Director of the Cambodia Paper and Spice Federation. Today I would like to apologize for not being with you on the live webinar today regarding to the celebration of the International Pepper Day with the first series of IPC Webinar 2023. So as currently I am in the province in the preparation for Khmer New Year. As you know, the COVID-19 affected to the global economic and the situation 2 years ago. So we cannot celebrate the Khmer New Year, but this year is a new year that we have opportunity to celebrate our Khmer New Year, to gathering family members, and to gathering a peace for our family and for Cambodian people. So let me wish you all from Khmer New Year's, and to speak for success, I would like to introduce you a bit about CPSS. CPSS formed in 2018 to represent the sector of the pepper and spice. CPSS is an information forum with bringing together stakeholders and facilitating their interaction, and is a platform for Spain, promoting, protecting the interests of its members and the image of their product. Our vision is to become the #1 platform in Cambodia for pepper and spice in the local and global market. We have our mission is to promote Cambodia to the world as a key global producer of high quality and safe pepper and spice. To contribute to the first series of the webinar, I would like to provide input regarding to the economic situation in Cambodia. The economic shift toward Asia is creating a golden opportunity for Cambodia to develop and modernize its industry, goods and service. That are 4 points as the key factor that contribute to the golden opportunity. #1 is a new road and infrastructures improving the supply chain. You know, one example about the new expressway from Phnom Penh to Sihanoukville, and additionally the bridge across the river. It's very helpful and cutting a lot of costs and improving the supply chain in Cambodia. Secondly, improve capacity in increasing value creation. We talk about international education program and national education program have been improving and qualified. So it's very important for the capacity building to the human resource in Cambodia that easy to access and create a value for the sector. And thirdly, easier access to water and electricity, reducing cost. And easy access to water is one of the two key factors that really support and to the sector, to the pepper sector. And fourthly, extensive network coverage, improving communication. Currently in Cambodia is very easy. It's easy to communicate. No matter telecommunication or internet, we can access nationwide. Contribution to this webinar, a pro-business mindset among relevant officials and authority is promoting Cambodian pepper export. We identify for the pepper sector, there are two key factors. Number one, a relevant official and authority are focused on export-oriented policy, such as ITA, bilateral agreement, etc., to boost the export. So, like the Ministry of Commerce, Ministry of Agriculture, they are start working on the export policy and focusing on the export action plan. Even the government, the royal government of Cambodia, provides a lot of incentive to the export sector. Secondly, regarding to exporter, you can apply for tax incentive from royal government, just like zero VAT and zero withholding tax, and another tax exemption such as revenue tax exemption. Continually, the production of Cambodian pepper and its export are growing. There are three key factors. A large variety of peppers is grown and available in 20 provinces out of 25 provinces. It equal to 80% of the total province in Cambodia. And the organic pepper production certified by Control Union and negotiation is steadily growing. And the third key factors, Cambodia-China pepper bilateral agreement, incentivize peppers, processor and exporter. And originally, it really benefit to the producer or farmer. And talk about the export and production. By 2022, the land of production is 6,000 hectares. And within 10,000 households that we use the pepper and 18,000 metric tons. By 2023, we expect that the total production will increase from 18,000 metric tons to 20,000 metric tons. That including 250 metric tons organic certified by Control Union, as certified by EU, USDA, and JAS certification. And talk about the export sector. By 2020, during the COVID-19, we export 3,681 metric tons. And move to 2021, we export 19,031 metric tons. For 2022, we export 12,437 metric tons. Outlook for 2023, we expect to export 18,000 metric tons, equal 100% of the total production. Key takeaway for this presentation, there are 10,000 households representing 40,000 individuals. And direct exports stand at 22 countries. There are 10 European countries, 10 Asian countries, 1 Australian country, and 2 North American countries. The projected certified organic production to increase from 200 metric ton to 250 metric ton to 500 metric ton by 2025. As you see, there is no doubt in my mind about Cambodian pepper sector promising futures. I am really looking forward to see Cambodian pepper sector, especially CPSS, involved into the international trade. And lastly, I would like to conclude and I would like to finish my presentation with a special thank you note to IPC for opportunity they give me to present today. And thank you to its Executive Director of IPC, Ms. Fernan Azura. And I would like to Khmer New Year. I would like Khmer New Year wish you and bring you a happiness, good health, and success for you and your family.
Thank you very much, Mr. One, and indeed, a very, very happy New Year. And I'm sure after quite a break during COVID, many people are celebrating, traveling, and are able to, meet their loved ones. And please enjoy your New Year, and thank you for a wonderful presentation. Yeah. So next is the presentation on global market scenario, and I would be presenting the same. I have 10 minutes and I'll be a little bit fast. I won't be presenting much on the supply side, just a few comments, but quickly I will tell you certain points and then talk more on the demand and pricing. So a quick recap. Let us look at the agroclimatic prerequisite for black pepper, the geography, key countries, key determinants, and what is the current situation for 2023. Next slide. If we look at the globe, there are three primary areas where pepper grows. Between the Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn, it's a tropical fruit, everybody knows. If you look at the globe, we have the Americas on the left side, we have in the center Africas, and we have Asia. So basically the three A's, Americas, Africa, and Asia, the dark colored portion in gray and black is where black pepper grows. And it needs temperature somewhere between 10 to 27 degrees. Slightly higher also is fine, but this is the optimum range. Rainfall of more than 1000 mm and humidity of about 80% is where pepper essentially grows. We have to bear this in mind that there are still many areas where pepper cultivation can happen within this range. And for example, Africa, there are several countries where there is a hidden potential where more supply can also increase. Next slide. Well, the global black pepper production, when we talk about the growing countries within the IPC framework, there are a few countries, and then there are several more countries which are having small crops. If we look at the data from the FAO, which is the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, they come up with a number of close to 660,000 tons globally. And if I divide them into the three A's, Asia is the highest producer at 520,000 tons. America is at 120,000 tons, and Africa is producing 20,000 tons. Next slide, please. Growth in black pepper production. From 1961 to 1990, we had a flat to a moderate growth over there. And post 1990, we've seen an exponential growth in line with the growth in the population also. In the period 2010 to 2015, the crop grew exponentially and prices rose beyond $10,000 per ton or $4.50 per pound. CNF New York. Prices have again come down now to $1.6 per pound, rendering pepper, farming unsustainable. New plantations are a rare sight since 2017, and acreage is slowly declining due to older plantations and dead vines or being replaced by other crops. Now, intervention in active gardening activities has reduced due to higher factor costs. Climate change has been producing fluctuating yields. And the bottom line is that the supply has more or less stagnated in the last 3 to 4 years. If you look at the crop reports of most of the countries, none of them has reported an extravagant growth. They are a modest growth here, there, and and maybe a little bit high, maybe a little bit low, but mostly it is stagnating in most of the large origins for the past 2 to 3 years. Next slide, please. So if I look at the countries globally that grow pepper, we usually talk about the top 10 countries, but there are actually 30 countries which are growing black pepper. In the Americas, Brazil being the largest, followed by Ecuador, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Honduras. Everybody has a small presence. In Africa, we have the maximum number of countries, but the crop size is very small. The largest one being Madagascar. We are seeing pepper in Ethiopia and Ghana as well. The largest producing area, as we mentioned earlier, is Asia. Bear in mind, this is data from 2020. So we've seen Vietnam right at the top in 2020 at around 270,000 tons. And then followed by Indonesia, India, Sri Lanka. China also has a local crop. The total over there is somewhere close to 540,000 tons in Asia. That is how Americas, Africa, and Asia put together, they reach to that close to 650,000 tons of black pepper. Next slide. So what is the current situation? Essentially, the output is a function of two things. Everybody knows the math. It is yield multiplied by the area. Now, if you look at the yield is further a function of two things. One is weather, which is not essentially in anybody's control. And then the second part is the motivation to spend on gardening, which is in the hands of the farmers. I mean, once they are motivated, they would spend more, do more effective gardening, which is what they can control. The area largely, again, is a function of two things, the existing plantation, and the second one is a new plantation, which comes after 3 or 4 years into fruition. So what we are seeing right now in terms of output, there is less motivation on the gardening side because of inflation, fertilizer prices growing, becoming higher, utilities becoming expensive, labor costs becoming expensive, and the return on pepper farming not that great. In fact, nobody wants to now buy new land if land is expensive and start pepper farming, unless that land is a concession land or cheap land. There is where we are saying new plantations are not seen in much or are not prolific right now, and therefore the output essentially now is a function of weather and the existing plantation. So if the weather is good, you have a good yield. If the weather is not good, you don't have a good yield. In some next please. So in some countries, what we are seeing, next slide please. So in some countries, we are seeing, if you look at, well, I'm not going to go into the global balance sheet because that will be presented later. I'm just trying to explain here. If you look at the 2023 projections, the green countries, Malaysia, Sri Lanka, Vietnam, perhaps the weather was conducive over there. India and Indonesia, weather was not conducive, so they are reporting slightly lower crops. Where it is good, they're reporting slightly higher crops. The biggest aspect in the global balance sheet was China, which was closed last year, and now they have opened up, and their domestic consumption is there, but they could not get the crop, and now they are there in the market and buying a lot of product. Let's move on to the demand now. Next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, so let us summarize the global demand in just one table. And I'm trying to explain to you here is what is the global demand or the consumption and where it is coming from. Either it is coming from a domestic growing or it is imported. Next slide, please. So if you look at the table on the slide, we've divided again the area into Asia, Americas, Europe, Africa, and the total. If you look at Asia, which is the largest producer and the largest consumer, consumption is somewhere close to 400,000 tons. 160,000 tons of that is domestically grown and 240,000 tons is roughly imported. Now within that, if I say India, China, Indonesia, and Middle East, which are the larger blocks of consumption and drivers of the market, Indian consumption is somewhere close to 80,000 tons, Domestic produce is around 60,000 tons. Import is 20,000 tons. Likewise, China is completely opposite to India, where China grows domestically only 20,000 tons and imports 60,000 tons. So if China is closed in a particular year, you can imagine that the amount of demand they have in terms of import of 60,000 tons is off the market. Indonesia consumption is 30 roughly, domestic is 30, and they get it from there, rest is exported. Middle East is zero growth, 100% import. So once again, Middle East becomes a very important factor in the unorganized market in deciding the prices, and rest of Asia is spread across everywhere into multiple countries, and their import is around 100,000 tons, while domestic growth would be around 50. Americas, which includes Brazil and United States, both the North and South America, the growth happens in the southern part. Largest consumption happens in the North America, US and Canada put together, where the demand is somewhere around 90,000 tons of import, and source over there. If I just take North America, if you count in Costa Rica, New Mexico, these places may have certain pepper over there being shipped to the north. Europe, 90,000 tons of total demand, and most of it, or rather 100% of it, is imported. Africa's 50,000 tons of demand. It's a 50-50 split, almost 20% grown domestically, 30% imported. And that's how the total global demand and supply looks like in terms of 650,000 tons of black pepper, which is moving from farms to the consumers. If I look at the valuation at wholesale level globally, it's close to $2.3 billion. The big blue box over there is essentially the food category, which drives 80% of the demand. In the developed world, people are looking for natural color, natural taste, all these elements driving the pepper demand. The rest of the world is essentially a population growth story. As populations grow and as incomes grow over there, they tend to find a better nutrition for themselves. And once you start eating more protein and you start consuming definitely a larger amount of spice complex, pepper being essential there. This growth is around 2 to 3% at a CAGR level. Then we look at an orange box, which is 10%. It is a newer application in terms of healthcare, where nutraceuticals and in medicine, etc., the application is there. The gray box, another 10%, is essentially into personal care, where we are looking at cosmetics starting to use natural ingredients. So recent challenges that happened, I mentioned, these are essentially geopolitical events, which had nothing to do with pepper supply and demand directly, but they impacted flow of goods or flow of pepper from one country to the other. And although consumption was there or it was required, the product could not be made available. And we saw the product or we had carryover inventory in the origins, and therefore prices came down. So lockdowns, war, etc., and of course diminishing speculative demand due to financial turmoil. What everybody has been mentioning is that we've seen higher interest rates, pressure on working capital. We are seeing defaults being happening. We've seen prices come down because of that. We've seen payment crisis in several countries because of balance of payments being in the adverse situation, etc. Next. Well, if you look at the long-term demand, in simple terms, if anybody has to be explained what is the long-term demand or what is going to happen to pepper, if you just draw the population curve and pepper supply over several years in the past, we see a correlation of 90%. So, and we project that, or United Nations at least projects that the world population would reach somewhere close to 9 billion by 2050. And if you just project the population curve, we could say, pepper consumption or demand is going to follow that. And we could expect anywhere between the pepper demand from 650 to move to 850 or a million ton of demand in the next 25 to 30 years. So demand is expected to grow at a pace of 2 to 3%, which is good news. But what happened in 2022? And while everybody was expecting that prices could slightly move up, they came down suddenly. As I have been explaining, this happened basically due to three factors: COVID in China, border being closed, inventory rationalization. Essentially, the purchase managers bought more inventory during COVID because they saw supply disruptions happening and the prices were excellent. And when prices are really very close to $1 or $2,000 per ton, we see generally people buying more pepper, and that is how the carryover inventory is high. And after that, once everything was opened, we are seeing that due to higher carry forward inventory, the buying is low. And of course, we've had a credit squeeze, we've had currency depreciation, and all the factors leading to drop in prices. Next. So let us look at the final part of the presentation, which is the price or the long-term price trend and the current situation. If we just go back in history and look at the long-term price trend, next slide, please. If you just go back and look at the prices in 2016, we've seen from 16 to 20 a cyclic correction happening, where, as I said in the beginning, from 2010 to 2015, there was an exponential growth in pepper. If you remember the slides I showed in the supply side in the beginning, from 2010 to 2015, there was an exponential growth in the supply. And consequently, we've seen from 16 to 20, there has been an exponential fall because there was oversupply during that period. And prices settled somewhere close to $2,000, at least in the larger trading origins like Vietnam and Brazil, which are mostly open for free market trade. And once COVID hit, prices were great. Prices started moving again as massive buying happened. Again, in 2022, we saw a very large country, out of the market. And as I said, 60,000 tons of import could not happen. That led to excess inventory and prices came down. Right now in 2023, we are seeing the Chinese re-entry, and as they re-entered, the prices in both the largest trading origins, especially Brazil and Vietnam, they recovered from their bottoms and they increased at least by 15 to 20%, and they are being maintained at current level. So if you look at the long-term cyclic views in the next slide, if we were to guess what is going to happen in the future, next slide. So if we look at 1975 to 2020, there have been three cycles where pepper prices rose as there was a shortage or the supply started lagging behind the demand. And as supply exceeded demand, the prices fell down quite quickly as well. And you see three peaks and cycles. Right now we are in 2022, as I said, very close to $3,500 per ton or $1.7 per pound CNF New York. What happens from here is anybody's guess. If you know, please let me know. Next slide, please. So closing remarks. Price volatility has increased due to geopolitical events rather than fundamentals of S&D. What I mean by this is that today the fluctuation in pepper prices, rather than looking at the fundamentals of supply and demand, have been impacted more due to geopolitical events such as war, such as COVID, have impacted the volatility in a larger way. Regulation continues to tighten. We are going to have eminent speakers coming and explaining the same thing. A long-term consumption trend remains robust, which is good news, as I explained. As populations rise, as incomes rise, consumption of pepper rises. Lack of new plantations are there to put, and this will put pressure on prices in near future. Awareness on sustainability is improving amongst consumers and growers as the market moves in that direction. What we need from everybody, not just IPC or the participants or market, etc., but everybody as a whole, we need transparency and timely availability of accurate data, and that is important. Because if we are not providing this information, the biggest disservice we are doing is to the farmers. Because if the farmers think that everybody's projecting there is less crop, they think prices are going to go up, they hold, but actually there is enough crop, and then they end up selling it very cheap. So the biggest disservice we do to growers is having lack of transparency in information, and that is very important to make the process transparent for consumers and the farmers so that they can plan their growing accordingly. Finally, climate change and rising factor costs have become key challenges on the supply side, and one has to bear in mind that going forward from now, these are going to be very important in determining where plantation happens. With this, I would like to end my presentation. We are going to take questions at the end of all the presentations, and let me also thank at this juncture IPC for allowing me to make a presentation. We are right now having more than above 200 viewers. I can see we have around 173 logged in into the Zoom portal, and we have several more people watching us live on YouTube. So I thank all of us and all of the viewers to be here and listen to our presentations peacefully. Over to now the guest speaker for today, Mr. Jan, who heads the IDH program. And Jan, a warm welcome, and over to you from here.
Thank you, Yasvinder. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Good morning also for people in the US. Thank you also. Good afternoon for Mrs. Ekaputri and the IPC board. I have been asked by IPC to give a quick view on the expectation, if you want, on sustainability. What is happening at the corner of sustainability? Yasvinder was already mentioning it a couple of times: climate change, sustainability awareness, and also traceability. All aspects that we discuss also when we talk about sustainability. There was also a request also, knowing that the group is broad in the audience, and that some people might not be totally up to date on sustainability, to bring it a bit from the basics to where we are now. I'm talking from I'm responsible for our spices program at IDH. IDH is an organization that works with different commodities on sustainability, and I would like to share our experience, but especially from the side of spices, where I am also the coordinator secretary of the Sustainable Spices Initiative. I'll come back to that. We are also partner of different organizations here, and I think in the audience also some members, but we are also partner of ASTA, for example, in sustainability. But then, okay, next slide, please. If you allow me, so as I was saying, we are working with different commodities, and where spices is one of the commodities working on sustainability. There are others that do that even for a longer time, like coffee, tea, and cocoa. They are further ahead, if you want, on this trajectory on sustainability. But we are finding out our way in spices, and there is a lot of things that to be shared right now. There's much more insights in what sustainability actually means for the sector. Next slide. Yeah, and we are also working. No, sorry, one back. Yes, thank you. We are also working with different commodities that are important for the retail, and spices is one of them. And so you could also look into fruit and vegetables, or juices, or flowers and plants and aquaculture. All of them are dealing with sustainability, and it's becoming more and more important for all of them. But going to spices specifically, and then pepper in there. Next slide. And the next slide. Thank you. Yeah, so this is an initiative, a platform, perhaps next slide, where a lot of companies, buying companies, but also processing companies, exporters from different origin countries are already participating. You might recognize a lot of your clients in there. For the governments, it's also good to know that there is quite a big group of companies in the US and in Europe leading a process around sustainability. And of course, they are not only owners of this topic, not at all. Sustainability is a global awareness at UN level, that we are already understanding more and more about the impact of different issues on sustainability of our production in spices and also in pepper. So perhaps next one. This group has 48 members. They are front runners in the industry and producers of different and processors of different commodities, crops within the spices sector, and pepper is only one of them. And the origins are mainly Asia also, if you want, in terms of production. Take the next. So okay, the big thing is what is sustainability? Where does it come from, right? Perhaps next is, I think the basic assumption is here, right? We are. I like this words that are here. The sentence, this thought is: we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, our parents, but we borrow it from our children. I think that's a mindset that's different than we used to be. We were looking a lot. We often think that we own everything and we just use whatever comes in our front, but we basically are. We borrow it from our children. So we have to be taking care of the world that is in the future, and we have to assure that whatever we use can be used again, or can be even better in production than later on for our children. Next, please. Different definitions were given on sustainability in the past. It's about using things without compromising the future. And later on, it becomes also more about, okay, we have to not think only about profit, but we have to think about people, we have to think about planet. And that became more and more common. But also, it was also seen that it is, it is even giving more value to things, right? It's not, you have to do also other stuff, but it is inherently good to do, and you assure your own future by taking care of planet and people, the producers, our own workers, etc. So we are talking about a transformation for an agenda of sustainable development. Next, please. And you all probably know this. There are different at the UN level, we agreed to reach sustainable development goals, and our Sustainable Spice Initiative has taken these ones as the horizon to work for. Next. And if you would look into, and these are the ones that are mainly relevant for the spices sector itself. Next, please. And I think most of you have been following the whole discussion about climate, for example, and just recently there was this climate conference in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, where we are getting really concerned about things now. It's about time to really work on a couple of things, otherwise we will have big issues going forward. And things like planet reaching a tipping point where the climate chaos is irreversible. That being said by the UN Secretary, Antonio Guterres, is quite a concerning thought. And I think we are all already involved in trying to see, okay, how can we cope with climate change right now? Next one. But then, okay, how do we translate that for spices in the spices sector? What is at stake in our sector, more specifically? And I think this is a result of a discovery in the past time, is that where we thought in the first instance, well, maybe spices is not too much involved in sustainability issues and so forth, we discovered that there is quite a lot of issues that are at stake in the spices sector. And to start with, I think it's important to, and you know better than I do, is that millions of growers are producing spices in general, and pepper too. It's mostly smallholder farming. It's different than other crops, and they are mostly most of them face poverty somehow. Smallholders, it's difficult to live from a small piece of land. They're always facing income issues, for example, and not to say also all kind of environmental changes, etc. right now. So in general, you could kind of classify them in 4 groups. At one end, the sector is like Jasminder was also mentioning, traceability, transparency, control. You have to have an overview of what's going on in your sector. And the pepper sector is rather well organized. There are other spices where there is much less of a view on what's going on. But it is important. It's important to have data. It's important to know where you're buying things from, and from the supplier side also towards the clients to be able to explain where you're buying from. On the food safety side, there is a lot of links to sustainability as well. Agrochemical use is huge, and pepper a lot as well. We are always facing the MRL issues in the spices sector. And on the farm level, it's also important that farmers use less also for their own production, their own land and the environment and their own land, but also for their own health and safety. So it relates to each other. But there are other topics like are you being transparent about what you are producing? Are you doing things in a fair way? Adulteration is one of the issues coming back very often in the spices sector. And the supply side, it's the same. I mean, if the MRLs are not taken care of, you will have claims and you have to send your containers back. That's not what you want. And in a longer term perspective, you also want to keep farmers producing and having enough income, enough productivity as well to be able to produce well. The social and environmental side, it goes without any further explanation that issues like human rights, child labor, and others are an issue that brings risks and also reputational risks to the group, to the sector. But it also involves directly the people that we are working with. The producers are part of our supply chain and an important reason for our sector to continue. Next, please. So we translated this next. Yeah. So if you translate that into a positive element, you can think about, okay, where do we have to take care of? And then you think about, okay, let's think about living income and living wages. And this is a topic that is coming up very much in the sector, not only in the spices sector, but in all sectors and commodities. So these are global discussions ongoing. So how can we assure farmers get a decent income from what they produce? The same is for workers. Can they earn a living wage? Gender equality, men and women. You know as well that women are a huge part of the production force, right? Women and men share the labor in the pepper production, and it's important that they have the same rewards for that as well and are not treated unfairly. Same is true for carbon emissions in our supply chains. We have to contribute as well to carbon reduction and the reduction of the climate change. Use of agrochemicals we already discussed. Water is another topic that comes back very often in the pepper industry. Next, please. Next slide. Hello.
Buddhiman, next slide, please.
Yes. All right. So, okay, more in general, I think it's important to be aware that it's not only because the market is asking for it, but more in general, for the credibility of our own allspices and pepper sector, it's important that we take sustainability very seriously, and it will become a license to operate at a certain moment. Right now, it's still voluntary. It's companies that take the front page, the front runners take a lead in it. They take leadership and try to guide the way. But it will become regulation also, and I will come back to that. But in Europe, for example, the due diligence legislation is coming up very quickly. In a couple of years, there will be several regulations set also for sustainability. So where 20 years ago we were talking about food safety and all regulations for food safety, now we are looking into sustainability and all and different regulations asking for the supply chains and buyers, but also their suppliers to respond and map the risk on environmental and social side. So they will come back to the suppliers. The buyers will come back to the suppliers with requests. Okay, how do you assess the risks on the social side and on the environmental side? So it's important that the sector itself becomes more aware and then takes this responsibility. And Jasvinder was already mentioning that when you were saying about awareness on sustainability, this is where it starts, right? And it's important that from the bottom, from the production side up to the buyer side, it is well understood, and it's a collective action. It's not something a buyer can do on its own. They can do their processing factory and do it well, but then still the whole supply chain that comes in front also needs to work together. And I think the solution also comes from collaboration, right? You cannot just let a farmer fix it. That's not the way it works, nor the processor can do it on its own. So perhaps next 2 slides, let's go a bit quicker because in terms of time, but I think it's also good business, right? And that's what our chairman also says all the time. So it's very important that this credibility also helps you to increase your demand and assure your buyers, right? If you're credible, if you're transparent, if you behave properly, you can manage it better too. You see where the risks are coming. You see when there is something happening in the field. You can address your sourcing better. And it also helps you saving costs. And that also counts for a farmer. If he is able to use less pesticides, it also saves a lot of money in the production side. So there is a lot of inefficiency, in the production as well that you can address and do both at the same time. So it cuts on both sides. Not to say at last, and it's an interesting one, access to capital. If you go to the banks nowadays, in Europe at least, and in the US, you will be asked about your ESG, your environmental, social, and governance compliance. And the better you are prepared, the more credible you are, the better finance or even access to finance is at stake. So there is no way we are going to, this is the reality in the future. So it is really becoming a license to operate. Even if you want to sell your company, it's good to have your ESG in order, right? Next, please. So in terms of productivity, if you want to know what is sustainability on the ground, I won't get much deeper into this. I think it's quite obvious that it's about producing good food, high quality, but also with care on environment and the people that are producing it. There are several international standards that respond for that. Organic was already mentioned earlier, but also all kind of sustainability standards that are used sometimes by buyers to audit and to certify, because if you want to have the product certified, you can also do that on sustainability. But it goes beyond that. Next, please. It's about trying, what can you do, right? So what are the actions on the ground? Even if you don't certify, you can start working on addressing climate change. You can reduce water use. You can protect the environment, biodiversity, and assure that farmers try to work with farmers to assure that they get a higher income, for example. Next. I'm going a bit quickly. So okay, let's continue. Let's skip this one. Yeah. Next one. And the next. Yeah, so I just want to show very quickly 3 practical examples. One of them is climate. How are we talking and discussing about climate and agrochemical use? Next. So we did an exercise of a life cycle analysis on different crops and country combinations. And this shows, for example, that pepper on the right side is a quite high, relatively to other spices at least, is a product that has quite a high carbon footprint. So on a kilogram of dry product, you will have 4 kilograms of CO2 being produced there. So if you would like, as a group, to address spices and carbon, you could start looking at pepper production and what could you do there, right? And then next slide. If you look deeper into the pepper production itself, then you will see this is 100%. So okay, here you can see what is really contributing to carbon in this case. And the Brazil and Vietnam are totally different countries, different situations, and you will see that in Brazil, land use change, deforestation is a big contributor to carbon footprint. If you look to pepper production in Vietnam, it's basically the agrochemical use, fertilizer production, but also the agrochemical, the pesticide and the pesticide production of it. right? In total, that is a big footprint. So when you contribute to reducing the use of inputs, you will also contribute to the reduction of carbon. Next, please. We'll skip this one for now. Next one. This is a picture I took just a couple of months ago in Vietnam, and this shows the intercropping with coffee and pepper, but also fruit with durians at the moment in this picture. But it also shows, if you look at the ground, at the soil, that there is no herbicides being used. It's a covered field, and you could say that this is a kind of a model for regenerative agriculture, if you want. Diversified production, at the same time, no need for herbicides, protection of soil where the soil is better protected, higher production, and a combination of tree crops and others, making it a system that in itself is ecologically better suited for future, right? So it's a more sustainable production type. So the whole regenerative agriculture is coming back big time in the whole discussion on sustainability. Next, please. Another topic is living income and living wages. Next. I'll skip this. Yeah, it's about people, and it's about trying to map. The next could be, yeah. It's about trying to map, okay, what is a fair income for farmers? Where are we now? What are the income origins for farmers? So farmers do not depend only on pepper or coffee. They depend on different incomes. So you can kind of map it out, calculate what would be a fair income for farmers. And then you can see what you can contribute to it by producing pepper and perhaps paying a better price, or help them to increase their productivity or increase the income from other sites, other products. Next. Finally, finally, and you could show this one. I'm mindful of time. Yes, thank you. This will be shared later on. I won't spend too much time on it, but I was referring already that in the European Union, we are having a big discussion about due diligence. Not a big discussion, it's becoming a law. And the European Union is investing a lot in creating awareness with the different supply chains, global supply chains. Okay, what are they going? What can be expected here? And what you can, and perhaps next slide, shows that there is a whole process of due diligence where companies are asked to identify the risks that they run in their supply chains on the social and on the environmental side. And by doing so, they are also asked to identify what can they do to stop it, to prevent or mitigate those risks. And this means that the companies that are buying, that are obliged to report that publicly, will be asking their suppliers also about the risks as well. So everyone will be asked to check the risk through different tools, checks the risks that they are running, and report on that as well, and what they are doing about it. Next. And final. Oh yeah, that one. Yeah. So certification is a good way to prepare for that and to address it, but there is more that that can be done, and collectively addressing those things collectively is one of the ways to do it. So, for example, in the we are working on issues like child labor, for example, in Turkey together with different partners, and we are working on agrochemical use in Vietnam with different partners. So you can address it as an individual company, but also as a group of companies together. I'll stop here, and I'm happy to take any questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jan. That was a very insightful presentation, and certainly you appear in a pepper farm much more sustainable than anybody else. So I like the background. And thank you very much for the presentation. It gave a very good insight into the basic concepts of sustainability and how one can go about it. Next, I would like to invite Ms. Laura, from the Executive Director of ASTA, to please take us through her presentation. Over to you, Laura.
Wonderful, and good evening, good afternoon, or good morning. Thank you so much for the opportunity to join you today. A big thank you to my friend and colleague Firna for inviting me today. IPC and ASTA have a special, long-standing formal collaboration through our MOU. And I'm so happy to join you virtually today. I also really would like to thank Firna for providing an excellent black pepper crop report video that will be presented at the ASTA annual meeting and exhibits next month. Next slide, please. I'm going to start off today with just a very high-level overview of what's happening in the U.S. food and regulatory environment. And then I'm going to move into a few key issues on regulatory developments in the United States related to food safety and some very new developments related to ethylene oxide, as well as some developments related to heavy metals, pesticides, and other regulatory issues. Next slide. To start off the presentation, I'd like to share some updates on the overarching political environment surrounding the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, or our FDA, which is the main regulatory agency that regulates food in the United States. I've worked in U.S. food regulations for the last 15 years, and I think that it's safe to say that the last year has been the strangest time I've ever seen at the FDA throughout my career. The backdrop is that there was a massive infant formula shortage due to recalls of infant formula, as well as a number of other high-profile food safety incidents. And in response to these incidents, the FDA received significant backlash from the media and other government agencies related to their lack of regulation of the U.S. food supply and what was seen as critical failings of the U.S. food supply. This has resulted in recently the FDA leadership for the foods program resigning, and currently there is no leadership right now for the FDA. In response to this criticism, the Food and Drug Administration commissioned an external report from the Reagan-Udall Foundation, which came out in December. The report recommends massive overhauls of the foods program at the FDA, big structural changes, including the consolidation of several programs that regulate food at the FDA to create one leader for the foods program, which previously we did not have. However, there's been no leader that's been identified yet. The agency published a vision for a reimagined FDA human foods program, which has yet to be implemented. So it's a time of a lot of uncertainty right now, but what are the implications that we can expect right now? What we're seeing is that there has been a really significant increase in enforcement by the FDA and a lack of willingness to practice any kind of flexibility or enforcement discretion, which we previously experienced in the past. And we expect that that is going to continue. The FDA does not want to be embarrassed again. They're under a spotlight. And so we expect to see much, much more enforcement of US food safety regulations. Next slide, please. As we expect to, you can go to the next slide, please. As we expect to see more scrutiny of the food supply in light of the recent FDA developments, I wanted to share just some basic information about the FDA's food import inspection and detention process, as we're seeing more detentions right now. First of all, I would encourage all of you to closely monitor all FDA import alerts related to herbs and spices to identify any enforcement trends that may be relevant to black pepper. The FDA uses an AI screening method that adapts to the testing protocols based on past violations. So what this means is if there is a violation for a certain product, you can almost certainly expect that FDA is going to start screening and testing more similar products like that for the same issues. By far the most significant enforcement issues for black pepper and the spice industry broadly is for salmonella. However, we're also seeing an increase in screening for filth, heavy metals, pesticide residues, and other issues. The chart on the screen outlines the inspection and detention process at import. It's noteworthy that this can take a very long time. It can take a matter of weeks or even months for the shipments to get through once the product has been detained. Next slide. On this slide, I've attempted to provide some information about what to expect if your product gets detained, along with some tips and recommendations about how to communicate with the FDA in the event that your product gets detained. For example, once your product gets detained, you will be assigned a formal hearing. You may request an extension to that hearing date. You can begin communications with your assigned compliance officer, but you can also go up to the leadership at FDA, starting with the leadership at the port level to discuss issues. And I would also encourage you all to leverage specialized consultants, legal counsel, and laboratories to help you deal with an issue if your product gets detained. Ultimately, the FDA will make a decision about whether to release or refuse entry of the product. If the product is refused entry, the company may also apply for reconditioning of the product, but that's only if there is an issue that can actually be reconditioned and dealt with, such as if it is a salmonella issue, then you can petition to have the product treated by steam treatment or radiation or ethylene oxide, and we'll talk a little more about what's going on with ethylene oxide later. Otherwise, the product will need to be re-exported or destroyed. If the product is placed on import alert or a red list, as we call it, the process to get removed can be quite challenging. It can be very, very difficult, and it can take a long time. The company who's placed on the import alert will need to get at least 5 consecutive clean shipments and also submit a petition to the FDA explaining how any future violations will be avoided. This can be very, very challenging and frustrating for importers. So I would encourage all of you that if your product gets detained, that you work through the process to avoid being placed on import alert if possible. And also just keep monitoring those import alerts so that you're aware of where the risks are and can try to prevent having a situation to begin with. Next slide, please. The potential for salmonella to occur in spices continues to be the top food safety and regulatory focus of the US FDA, as well as the US spice industry. Any spices that are being imported into the United States must have undergone a validated kill step, along with a study of that validated kill step demonstrating that a 5-log reduction of the salmonella has been achieved, or else the product needs to be labeled as not processed to control salmonella, in which case the company that receives the product, or down the line at some point, a company that receives that product will need to apply that validated kill step. To support the spice industry in the development of validation studies, ASTA published updated guidance and research last year that discusses how spice companies can leverage a validation study of a single spice to apply to a broader array of different spices. ASTA is also continuing to offer education and resources on the state of science of traditional and emerging food safety treatment methods. And in fact, we're holding a symposium next month in advance of our annual meeting and exhibits on this topic, and I hope you guys will all join us there. Next slide, please. Ethylene oxide, or ETO, is one of the most common treatment methods to control salmonella in spices. ETO is currently permitted to be used on spices in the United States. However, due to concern about cancer risk for workers and communities nearby factories using ETO, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA, recently proposed new regulations to control the emissions and use of ETO. These regulations propose new restrictions on the use and the emissions, including a proposed phased cancellation of the use on spices, except in the cases where industry can demonstrate that there are no viable alternatives that can be used to control salmonella or other pathogens in those spices. ASTA is strongly advocating for the continued authorization to use ETO on spices in the US. However, this is challenging, especially since developments at the local and state level and litigation against companies using ETO have intensified the regulatory environment. The new proposal may also ultimately end up resulting in changes to the ETO MRLs for imported spices, but this is also something that ASTA is strongly advocating against. Next slide. So shifting gears, I wanted to talk a little bit about heavy metals because the US spice industry has been facing pressure from both the government as well as the public through the media on heavy metals, including lead, cadmium, and others, but particularly lead is currently the main contaminant of concern. Next slide, please. The FDA's focus has been on lead in baby food and foods consumed by young children and infants. However, there has also been some focus on, there has been some enforcement of lead and heavy metals in spices and other food products. Recently, FDA announced new proposed guidance levels for lead in baby food and has informed ASTA that the agency is not planning to release any guidance levels for spices. Currently, there are no guidance levels for spices for heavy metals in the US, and instead, FDA is evaluating each shipment that comes in on a case-by-case basis. There have been a number of recent import alerts for lead and other heavy metals in certain spices, although we have not seen challenges for black pepper in particular. And that's all I have for this slide. So next slide, please. In 2021, the state of New York announced new proposed levels for heavy metals in spices, which were very, very low. ASTA strongly advocated against this proposal. We hired a lobbyist in the state of New York. We met with all levels of government in the state and pushed back very strongly against this proposal. And in response, the levels have been placed on hold for at least 3 years while the state conducts additional research. So right now, the current level of 1 part per million for lead in New York continues to remain in effect at least until the end of 2025. And in the meantime, we are continuing to advocate for this to be completely changed and for the state to use a completely different approach, ideally one that aligns with what the EU has done. Next slide, please. At the same time, the issue of lead and other heavy metals in spices has garnered media attention, and several spice companies have also been sued as a result of the attention to the issue. Next slide, please. ASTA has developed resources including messaging, fact sheets, FAQs, and guidance levels for lead in spices that are based on global limits, such as those adopted in the European Union. For example, the ASTA guidance level for black pepper would be encompassed under the fruit spice level of 0.6 parts per million. Next slide, please. Next, I'd like to discuss the US pesticide regulations. Next slide. This slide shows a list of the import alerts for pesticides in processed spices over the last year. So we have 2023 to date and what we saw in 2022. Notably, we have not seen shipments of black pepper that have been placed on import alert for pesticides throughout the last year. However, I do also want to note that the situation can very quickly escalate. If you take, for example, what's going on with sesame seeds, there have been 23 import alerts for sesame seeds in the last year. And this is really an example of what I was talking about earlier in the process of how FDA uses AI to screen imports. So once the one port starts to see challenges with a commodity, it will ramp up the testing and enforcement of similar products, which can result very rapidly in a significant disruption to the products that are being imported if there is a widespread problem. And so that's why we try to avoid getting into this situation to begin with, because once it starts, it can be very difficult to deal with the situation. Next slide, please. So briefly, I wanted to give an overview of the US policies for pesticides in food products. So the US EPA is the agency that establishes pesticide tolerances, or that's the word we use for MRLs in the US. But it's the FDA's responsibility to screen and test and enforce these EPA regulations. Technically, there is a zero tolerance for any amount of a pesticide residue if we don't have an established tolerance, or MRL, for that specific chemical and that commodity. And unfortunately, the US has very few tolerances for black pepper and other spices for pesticides. However, the situation isn't, quite that challenging, because the FDA does use enforcement discretion on very, very low levels of residues that are less than 10 parts per billion. And additionally, the testing of spices for pesticide residues is not typically very frequent, although as we saw on the last slide, it can ramp up quickly if it starts to become a problem. To better understand how companies can ensure compliance, ASTA has asked FDA to share a list of all the pesticides that it screens for. And so we have a list available for our members from the FDA of all of the pesticide residues that it screens for, so that can help companies guide their own testing and compliance strategies. Furthermore, I think you may all be aware that back in 2022, EPA imposed a ban of chlorpyrifos, all chlorpyrifos residues on all food products. The FDA did allow for a brief transition period for certain commodities that previously did have an MRL that expired under the ban, but that's already over for most of the commodities. There are a lot more details about all of these practices on a recorded webinar that ASTA has available on our website. So if you want to learn more about how the US FDA screens for pesticides, particularly in spices, I would strongly encourage you to watch this webinar. Well, we currently don't have many tolerances or MRLs for spices in the US. ASTA has been actively looking for opportunities to expand the number that we have to create a better compliance environment for the spice industry. We've already secured 2 new tolerances for metalaxyl and difenoconazole for black pepper, and we're looking to obtain new tolerances for azoxystrobin and cypermethrin. We've submitted a petition for cypermethrin. We would be happy to submit more petitions to the US government to get even more MRLs. However, in order to do so, we need residue data. It's the only way that we can get the US government to set new levels. And so that's a real opportunity for collaboration between ASTA and IPC and our other origin partners. Next slide, please. As we look to the future, ASTA is embracing sustainability initiatives, including a recent memorandum of understanding that we signed with the Sustainable Spice Initiative. And as a part of these broader sustainability initiatives, we have been working with SSI and other partners at origin to promote compliance with US regulations. For example, we conducted a research project in Vietnam on how to minimize heavy metals in kasha, and we have also a partnership in Vietnam on how to promote compliance with the global regulations for pesticides in black pepper, and that has been really effective. Next slide, please. Finally, to touch on a couple other regulatory updates you may want to be aware of. The first is that the U.S. Department of Agriculture recently released a new strengthening organic enforcement rule to bolster oversight and enforcement over organic production. So this imposes a lot of new rules related to organic certification. If you'd like to learn more, ASTA offered a webinar on this regulation just last month with the USDA experts on the topic, and it is recorded and offered for sale to members and non-members, so great resource. Additionally, last but not least, ASTA has had an initiative over the last year to promote the health benefits of spices to the US government in an effort to improve the reputation of spices. For example, the FDA recently proposed a new definition of healthy. So this is a marketing label that any food product can put on their package so long as it meets a certain definition. And the initial definition that the FDA had proposed for healthy did not include spices. So ASTA has advocated to request that the FDA expand the definition to allow spices to be labeled as healthy. And likewise, we're also promoting the use of spices in the school lunch program, as well as under the dietary guidelines for Americans. Next slide, please. Finally, you are all welcome to join us at ASTA's upcoming in-person events over the next year. We have our ASTA annual meeting and exhibits coming up just next month in San Diego, and our regulatory workshop on October 16th to 18th in Washington, D.C. Both members and non-members alike are all invited and welcome to join us. So we hope you will. And finally, that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions once we get to the question period.
Right. Thank you very much, Laura, for a fantastic presentation. We would request now our Executive Director to please present the crop report for 2023.
Right. Thanks, Jasvinder. Okay, I think we can share the crop report, yeah? All right, after listening to all presentation on the country's crop report just now, I would like to share the consolidated crop report for 2021. We have 2022 and 2023 for IPC countries and also non-IPC countries, yeah? Right, next slide, please. And I would like to sum up that from the consolidated global crop report just now, based on IPC calculation on crop survey and country report by IPC member countries. Global pepper balance sheet for 2023 has showed an increasing trend, yeah, though production export projected with a decrease of 2%, if you can see from the slide, and 1% respectively as compared to 2022. And the total carry forward for 2023 was projected at 267 kilometric ton, or an increase by 6% as compared to 2022. And last but not least, import and domestic consumption are expected to rise with the reopening of the Chinese borders for the trade. That's all, Jasvinder. I think we can move to Q&A, yeah, if you have questions later. All right, thank you.
So with this, we are, we've come to the end of all presentations. If there are any questions, we see there are just 2 questions posted or open at the moment. One question is from an anonymous attendee saying that we have processed pepper stem waste into nanocellulose. Visit my regular scholar. So I think this is an information he wants to share. And that's it. We have just this one open question, and we've had 2 questions being answered already online. Yeah. So that's it. If there are any more questions, we can wait for a few minutes. If yes, madam, please.
Yes. Can I make a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for opening this seminar, and I would like to take this to congratulate Rasvinder and also the IPC team, and more importantly, all the distinguished speakers to join us today. Also, strong support from the audience. I used to be the ex-ED at the IPC. Now my name is Lien, chairperson of the Vietnam Pepper Association. I have a question about the referring to the data and statistics presented by Indonesia. So I would like to, if Indonesian can give more clarification on, for example, on the production number that they haven't provided in the presentation, that number one, and then point number two, on what ground they made they projected the production for 2023, that is around 83,000 metric tons. So taking into account the statistics of export and import in 2022, for example, export only 29,000 tons and import 500 something tons. So I see there is a big gap between production and export. So big numbers missing. So if you can, give more clarification on the number, I would like to, I think that is also very matching to the one point that Rasvinder made in the conclusion, that transparency is one of the requirement and important to the entire industry, including farmer and exporter and on those business trader, everything, to have the more accurate and assessment about the market in order to have a good prediction, very objective, relevant to the fact, to give everyone in the industry the correct response to the market. So I think that is my intervention. So thank you very much.
Yeah, madam, should I take this question?
Yes, please. Thank you.
So basically, yes, the official position of the government has been that this is the number. However, after discussing internally and with the trade, we've revised the numbers. If in the summary crop reports that is being presented to ASTA or to other audiences, we've said that the Indonesian crop is somewhere close to 65,000 tons. The domestic consumption is around, or the export is around 29 to 30,000 tons, and the domestic consumption is around 40,000 tons, which is roughly in line with their population and assumption that this much would be consumed. Of course, Indonesia is known for also having high stocks in periods when prices are low. We have seen some years where Indonesians are able to, at least the traders have kept thousands of tons, and then they release it in years where prices are higher. So we never know what is the real stock situation as such at an individual level. But definitely, if you look at the new numbers, the numbers have been toned down. And therefore, when we are saying that the global production is -2%, then -2%, if you look at the balance sheet, is essentially coming when we are saying that Vietnam is higher, Brazil is higher or similar, then who is lower? It is essentially Indonesia is dragging the number down now this year for 2023, when we are showing that the production is lower. That is how we revise that number now.
Thank you.
So I think we had the question being asked, and the no more questions here at the moment. I would request our ED to present the vote of thanks and close the program. Madam, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jaswinder, for moderating the session today. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone, each one of you, our guest speakers, and of course our webinar participants for having time off, to attend our webinar. And on behalf of the IPC Secretariat, we hope that you have benefited from this webinar, and we would like to see you again in the near future, and I think we can have a group photo, right? Can everyone switch on the camera, all right. And also, can I say, all right, come join us. We have also the exporters, importers here with me here. All right, okay. Can we have a photo session now? All right, with a count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Thumbs up. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Good night, from Jakarta, and have a good rest. Happy working. Those who are in Laura, Miss Ian, happy working, all right. And Jaswinder, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, madam, and thank you everybody over there for a fantastic show. I hope you had a very good, you had a tiring day, but very fulfilled day at the end of it. Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much, everyone.
Good evening.
Bye-bye.
Good evening to everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Together, we